Thank you very much. When I first got elected to Congress 32 years ago, I thought it was a great accomplishment. But when I got there, the veteran congressman would say to me, yeah, any idiot can get elected to Congress by telling the voters what they want to hear. The real accomplishment is getting reelected when people actually know who you are. So, while I was pleased to be invited to CPACHungary last year, I am even more honored that after last year, you invited me back to be here again this year. So thank you very much. If I've learned anything from studying history, it's that evil is real and every culture succumbs to it because eventually people put their faith in the lies of man instead of the truth of God. Today, the enticing lies told by the political leftists and cultural leftists, academic, and even religious elites now dominate Western culture. The goal of these liars is to accumulate power, suppress dissent, and impose their will on the masses. It's another Marxist revolution, but not a proletariat uprising against the elites, but again, leftist cultural revolution led by the wealthiest and most powerful elites who now control our universities, our news media, Hollywood, big labor, and now even big business. It was after the left's conquests of the corporate America as a result of the technology revolution that I wrote a book in 2004 predicting the left's next target, the family and the church. The book, titled It Takes a Family, was in response to Hillary Clinton's book, It Takes a Village. In that book, she called for the village to help protect an increasing number of overwhelmed single mothers to help them raise their children. So, leftist ideas like the sexual revolution, radical feminism, population control, and the welfare state create an explosion of stressed single mothers, and then the left proposes to help them by expanding the role of government, particularly in schools, to raise their children. 20 years later, these schools hide information from parents, intimidate these parents if they dare protest, then let children make life-altering decisions with the state protecting these children from their loving parents. As I said in the book, the destruction of the family is not a flaw of leftist policies, it is the goal of leftist policies. State control of raising children is essential, well, because leftists aren't having children. Thanks to abortion and the belief that children are a burden that destroys the planet and could ruin your life, they, with the timid complacency of all but a few conservatives, indoctrinate our children with their perverted values in government schools. For years, they taught critical race theory or sexually groomed children until COVID lockdowns. And there, parents saw what their children were actually learning, what was actually going on, and they began to fight back. They rose up. In response, our leftist government used the FBI to threaten criminal prosecution of parents as terrorists instead of prosecuting perverted teachers. The people are fed up, but we continue to lose this battle in America because conservative leaders continue to run from the fight. Last year, when conservatives won our greatest victory, overturning Roe versus Wade, conservative leaders had no plan, they were even leaked the document two months before the decision, and still no plan, no resources, no message to capitalize on the success. And what happened? Well, the movement has been in full retreat ever since. Party leaders and national candidates, elites themselves, don't talk or want to talk about moral issues for fear of both public examination of their own lives and the fear of being ostracized by their friends, the elites, including, by the way, often their own woke children. Pathetically, they insist pocketbook issues matter most to the voters on Election Day, while ignoring that it's the state of the family, and the church that is going to determine the fate of our republic. In communities where 75% of children are born out of wedlock and raised without a father, the left gets roughly 90% of the vote. Atheists, or voters who have no religious beliefs, now 25% of the American public, voted 75% for the leftist candidate. The assault on the family and faith is working. These groups are the fastest growing demographic among young voters. The recipe is simple. Destroy the nuclear family, drive faith out of schools and public places, discourage work, then borrow money to send to these people who are devastated by these policies so they vote for you. It is an evil spell that is cast by elite fools, most of whom have no idea who their true leader is. But here in Hungary, you and your leaders do know who is behind this evil. Here in Hungary, your government isn't complicit in destroying families and confusing and corrupting children. And here in Hungary, you fight this evil, you fight for the souls of your children, and you win. Conservatives in America can learn from you that accepting the lies of the left, or as your Prime Minister often says, playing by their rules, is not just a losing game politically. It is a game that will lose the soul of your country. We must stand together to fight these lies, because only living the truth, living consistent with the natural law of the Creator, will lead to real happiness. Contrary to the vicious slander that such conservatives are motivated by hate, we actually care enough about our fellow countrymen that we want them to find joy in being the person God called them to be. We want to build a virtuous moral society based upon the central truth that each individual is created in the image of God, with inherent dignity and with the purpose to pursue God's plan for their lives. Not a society where the elites propound a set of ever-changing rules that enhance their control over the masses, where people are assigned value based upon race and ethnicity, sexual identity, or their, quote, intersectionality quotient. I know Hungary is paying a price for standing up to the elites in Brussels. But in this fallen world, to stand for God's truth always has come at a cost. So I'm back. I'm back here to encourage you to persevere. I have led or been on the front lines of every cultural battle in America for the past 30 years. With the notable exception of abortion, we have lost every single one of them, and most without much of a fight. But through it all, I have learned that if you are faithful, God will be faithful. That doesn't mean that we will win. But as Mother Teresa is quoted as saying often, God does not call on us to be successful. He calls on us to be faithful. So I'm going to close with one of, frankly, many stories of God's fidelity and encouragement in my life. When I was a senator, I led the fight to override President Clinton's veto of the late-term abortion bill. The night before the vote, after debating the bill all day, I remained on the floor to adjourn the Senate. Sitting there, I was overcome with the need to speak more. There were only 2 votes short, and I thought maybe a few recalcitrant senators might hear me on their television at home and possibly change their vote. So I called my wife at home, and she answered, and I could hear the youngest of our 3 children crying, and I said, Karen, I feel like God is calling me to stay here and say more. And she said what she always says, is if that's what God's calling you to do, that's what you need to do. So I went back into the chamber and told the presiding officer who was the only other senator there at the chamber at that late hour, that I would only be a few minutes. 2 hours later, I finished. Don't worry, I'm almost done. The dominant argument senators made for late-term abortions is that it must be kept legal in the case a mother finds out late in pregnancy that her child is sick or disabled. So I felt compelled to tell the stories, inspiring stories, that piled into my office during this time, sent by people with genetic disabilities from, frankly, all over the world who were listening to senators calling for the termination of their lives and people like them from the floor of the United States Senate. When I finished, I drove home and found Karen and the kids, of course, in bed asleep. I left early the next morning, drove into Washington, and we lost by 2 votes. Not one vote changed. I had failed again. I walked out of the Capitol building beating myself up for being so arrogant to think that my great oratory was somehow going to win the day. And I thought I wasn't just a rotten, egotistical senator for rotten, egotistical senator for thinking that, but I was a rotten, egotistical husband and father for leaving my kids and wife again alone at home at night. Well, 2 days later, I got an email. It was from a young man from Michigan State University, and it read like this. My girlfriend and I were zipping through the channels on TV when I saw you standing next to a poster of a little boy with some disability, so we stopped to listen to what you had to say. You talked about how courageous this young man was and how much his family loved him. My girlfriend was getting emotional, so I looked down at her and I asked, is everything okay? And she looked up at me as tears rolled down her cheek, and she said, I'm pregnant. And I have an abortion scheduled for tomorrow. And I wasn't going to tell you. But I'm not going to have an abortion anymore. He finished by saying, I'm sorry you lost your vote, but I want to thank you for saving the life of my child. That young man sent me several more emails about the progress of them and their little girl and God's triumph. And that little girl is now 24 years old. Losing a fight and receiving an email of your victory may have never happened to you. Maybe it's because God knows you don't need as much reassurance as I do. Or maybe, just maybe, you aren't fighting the battles God is calling you to fight. Here's a quick tip. When you're fighting for the dignity of all human life, when you're fighting for the family as God has ordained it, and when you're fighting for the freedom of people to serve their God, He will bless you and He will bless your country. He will be faithful. I know on this continent you will likely lose most of these battles. But please, please do not weary. Keep fighting. Keep inspiring the world, even if things don't go your way. Because I assure you that you didn't lose. You just didn't get the email. God bless you.